On today's episode of Cubs 360, it is Black Friday, so we're going to go over some buy low candidates that the Chicago Cubs could go after during free agency. We're also going to talk about the moves that the Chicago Cubs made. They made 2 trades, so we'll discuss those. And finally, the Cody Bellinger trade rumors, because those are really picking up, and we'll see where things are going with that. That's all happening soon on Cubs 360. What's up, Cubs fans? This is Cubs 360 episode 4. I'm your host, Jack. If you're interested in this content, feel free to like and subscribe, and also follow us on Twitter at Cubs360X. So there's a bit to get to. It's been a bit since I've made my last episode, but we've been waiting for these moves to happen, and some of them have finally come, so let's get to it right now. But before we begin, it is Black Friday today, so for those that celebrated yesterday, happy Thanksgiving. And obviously, it's the shopping spree today because it's Black Friday, so let's go over some things that the Chicago Cubs could do. Anyways, let's go over some 4 guys, because there's 4 guys specifically that I want to talk about. And we're going to start with a couple of relievers because, again, the relief and the bullpen has not been good for the Chicago Cubs last year, so we're going to go over that right now. So the first guy is a guy that was non-tendered, and it's an interesting one to talk about. His name is Kyle Finnegan. He was the closer for the Washington Nationals, and he was the all-star for the Washington Nationals in the National League, and he posted 38 saves with just 5 blown saves. So that alone is a huge upgrade to what we had with Hector Neris and then Porter Hodge, who came in after Neris was designated for assignment. So let's get to it right now. So the likely reason the Nationals non-tendered Finnegan was his projected $8.6 million arbitration salary. Finnegan made only $5.1 million last year and produced 1.0 WAR. His numbers were good but not great, and his numbers over the last 4 years are quite similar each year. So you pretty much know what you're going to get with Finnegan, who was 6th round from the A's in 2013 and landed in Washington as a 6-year minor league free agent in 2019. He turned 33 in September, so obviously that's not going to be a long-term deal as he's getting up there in age. But similar to what he made in 2024, his contract could be somewhere around like $5 million with a $6 million mutual option for 2026. Or a $500K buyout, which would be pretty reasonable. So, again, Kyle Finnegan is not expected to make a lot of salary, and with 38 saves, that's pretty solid compared to what we had last year. I think we had like 20-something blown saves, and he only blew 5 of them. So, I know there was a ton of controversy with Finnegan because, again, his age, the salary, and whatnot. But I think if Jed Hoyer wants to get a closer, and not an expensive one, because there's some like Estevez, the guy from Milwaukee, that could be eventually available. There's a ton of closers, but if he wants to get a buy low option, I think this is one you can go for. Kyle Finnegan with 38 saves. That's one of the most in Major League Baseball last year. So let's get to the second one. This is also another reliever. It is Jordan Romano, who was non-tendered by the Toronto Blue Jays. There's a lot more risk with Romano. He had elbow surgery in July, and he missed the rest of the year. And it wasn't Tommy John. It is described as an impingement, so it's possible he could be ready to go for the 2025 season opening day. But before the injury, he was a lights-out closer for the Blue Jays for 3 years, from 2021 to 23. In a 3-year span, he posted a 2.37 earned runs against with a 1.091 WHIP with 184 appearances with 95 saves and just 9 blown saves. He didn't give up many long balls. He only gave up 17 in 186 innings, and he had a good strikeout and walk rates. So before the injury, this was one of the best closers based off these statistics over the last 3 years. So it really all depends if he's able to be healthy for the beginning of the year. If not, then this is another option that he could go for. He only made $7.75 million in 2024, and by MLB trade rumors, he's projected to make the same next year. So, again, another buy low option, a little bit more than Kyle Finnegan. And he will be 32 in April, so he's slightly younger than him. And it just really depends on health, essentially. I think if you can be able to get a guy that's healthy for the remainder of the season and throughout the season, on top of the stats that he had, this is really good. So it'll be interesting to see what Jed Hoyer does in terms of free agents for relief pitching. So again, this is pretty solid so far. We're going to go with another guy. This guy is a catcher, and it's going to be not Danny Jansen. I know Danny Jansen is probably the number one catcher on the open market right now. I think he's going to make a little bit of money because there's some teams that do need catching. So it's a possibility that he might get a little bit more. And we're going to go over the other guy that is really the major catcher on the market, and that is Carson Kelly. So we'll see what happens with this one, and we'll just go through some reading right now. He had a projected contract of $8.75 million, which would be inside the top 10 in baseball. He was traded to the Texas Rangers. He started the year with the Detroit Tigers before they made their run to the playoffs. But throughout the year, he produced a slash line of .238, .313, and then .374 with 9 doubles, 9 home runs, and a triple. He knocked in 37 runs, and several parts of his game are average to above average. So we'll see what happens with his defensive side of catching, but these aren't terrible offensive numbers, but we'll see what happens with that. I mean, obviously, he's not the number one catcher on the market, and obviously because that's Danny Jansen. Danny Jansen had a really good year. But those stats are able to land him a multi-year deal in free agency this winter, and it's expected to be a 2-year, $17.5 million deal. That's where the $8.75 million comes from. There have been bright spots throughout his career. In 2019, he had a career-high 19 home runs and only 314 at-bats. He recorded an on-base percentage of at least .343 twice in his career. So there's certainly some intrigue and untapped potential for a team to coax out of him. Still in the prime of his career, a second or third year could be what separates one team's offer from another, swaying the former second-round pick to the franchise. So that's another option the Chicago Cubs have in free agency. Carson Kelly is actually a decent catcher, and his offensive numbers are pretty good, and the Cubs do need a guy that can be able to get some offensive game going, especially in the catcher position, because Miguel Amaya really necessarily isn't that guy. So Carson Kelly would be a solid plan B option. Obviously, there's Kyle Higashioka, but he's up there in age. That's not somebody I really want to go after. So Carson Kelly, not a terrible option, but let's go to number one on this list because that's the guy I really want to talk about, and this is a legit option for the Chicago Cubs in free agency, and that is starting pitcher from the Cleveland Guardians, Shane Bieber. So I'm not really going to go through much because Shane Bieber, obviously, as you know, was a former Cy Young winner. He is one of the best pitchers when he's healthy. Note that I said that because he came off of Tommy John surgery earlier in the year. So there's a chance that Shane Bieber might not even be ready to start the year. It depends on where his recovery is going. It seems like it's going in the right direction, and it seems like teams are really interested in signing Shane Bieber. Obviously, he's one of the younger pitchers in the game, and he's really good. Don't get me wrong. But I do think this is a buy low candidate because of his injury, and I don't think teams are going to want to go for a long-term deal with him. Obviously, like I saw something that his contract projection was like $147 million over 6 years. I don't think anybody's going to touch that. I would assume someone maybe goes for like somewhere between 10 and 15 million on like a 1 or 2 year deal just so he can prove it and be able to show that he's healthy, and then maybe go for the long-term deal. I think that's a risk that the Chicago Cubs could take because it doesn't seem like they're going to be going after the big free agents on the market like a Corbin Burns, like a Max Fried. Blake Snell signed with the Dodgers already. So, again, Shane Bieber is a solid option out there, and if you can't even get a guy for trade because there's been a lot of rumors with the Seattle Mariners, Shane Bieber is a guy that I would definitely take a shot at, and it's just got to be at the right price because if it's too expensive, I don't think anybody's going to be taking that risk, but if he's able to be on a shorter-term deal at less AAV, then I definitely think it's worth it. Almost similar to Cody Bellinger. Only made like, $7 million, and then he had the really good year. Then they signed him to the contract that he did, and we'll get to Cody Bellinger later. That's something that Shane Bieber could be willing to do. Hopefully he's willing to do that because I think the Chicago Cubs should definitely look at him. So anyways, those are the buy low options that the Chicago Cubs are looking at, and we'll see what happens in free agency. Obviously, winter meetings are sometime in the next month, so a lot more moves will be happening. We'll see what happens with the Chicago Cubs in free agency. But speaking of moves, they made a couple weeks ago, so we're just going to go through them right now. So the Chicago Cubs made a trade for a reliever, and that is reliever Eli Morgan. So he goes from the Guardians to the Cubs in exchange for Alfonso Rosario. So he's a single-A outfielder. So for those that want to go back to my video last time regarding prospects, we have an abundance of outfield prospects, and not all of them are going to be able to make the jump to the big leagues. So Rosario, and there's been some different holes in his game, especially on the offensive side of it. He's pretty inconsistent at the batter's box, from what I read, but let's get more into that. So, standing at 6'1" and 210 pounds, the 20-year-old right-handed hitter is currently MLB Pipeline's 21st-ranked Cubs prospect, so he's at number 21. He was selected by the Cubs in the 6th round of the 2023 MLB Draft out of P27 Academy in Lexington, South Carolina. He was initially committed to playing junior college baseball at Chipola College in Florida, but chose to forego his commitment to sign with the Cubs. After playing 9 games of rookie ball last year, he played his first full professional season with the single-A Myrtle Beach Pelicans in 2024. His batting average was .230 with 88 hits, 18 doubles, 4 triples, 16 home runs, 73 RBIs, 20 stolen bases, and a .767 OPS in 109 games. Rosario ranked 3rd in the Carolina League in both RBI and extra base hits with 38, 4th in home runs and total bases at 162, and 7th in slugging percentage at a .462. He was one of 3 single-A players with at least 16 home runs and 20 stolen bases during the 2024 campaign, and he will join a strong group of Guardians outfield prospects, 7 of whom are in the top MLB Pipeline's top 30 Guardians prospect list. Based on the productive 2024 season with single-A Myrtle Beach, Rosario could start next year with the defending high-A Midwest League champion Lake County Captains, but it'll ultimately tell where he starts in 2025 because that's not fully guaranteed. So, like I said, we just have an abundance of outfield prospects, and we needed some bullpen help, so I like this move for both teams. It's a little bit more high risk, high reward for the Guardians because you don't necessarily know what you're going to get from Alfonso Rosario because he hasn't really quite proven himself yet. Eli Morgan, you do know a little bit more about him, and we'll get to him and his stats in just a second. So Eli Morgan, who's 28 years old, is not a household name, but nonetheless, he represents a notable addition to the Chicago Relief Corps. The former 8th-round pick is fresh off a terrific season in Cleveland, having posted a 1.93 ERA in 42 frames out of the bullpen. Morgan was the beneficiary of a microscopic .22 average on balls in play and a bloated 85.2% strand rate, both of which serve as a portent for some ERA regression. However, he's been a quality reliever for the past 3 years, working to a combined 3.27 ERA in 176 innings for the Cleveland Guardians. He did see, however, his strikeout rate check in at a career low 20.4% this past season, which is something out of a red flag. The primary culprit has been a drop in swinging strikes against his four-seamer, though he hasn't lost much in the way of his velocity on the pitch. Morgan still racks up plenty of whiffs in his slider and changeup, and that pair of secondary offerings has helped him keep both righties and lefties off balance in his 4-year MLB career. Even with the dip in punch-outs, Morgan fanned 28.1% of his opponents in 2022 and 25.1% in 2023. He maintained strong command, issuing a walk to only 6.6% of opponents. For the Cubs, he will be a multi-year option in the bullpen and an affordable one at that. He is controlled for another 3 seasons, and he's projected by MLB Trade Rumors contributor Matt Schwartz to earn just $1 million this upcoming season. His role in Chicago will determine to the extent of which his price tag rises over the next few years. Saves are compensated more in arbitration than middle relief work, for instance, but the Cubs will very likely pay fewer than $10 million for the 3 years of service they're acquiring. So, I do believe Eli Morgan, the best place to put him, and what I saw, he's definitely a guy that you could put in the setup role, and I think that would definitely make a lot of sense. You find a closer in free agency, and Eli Morgan can be the setup. You have to find those long relief guys because you can get your starting pitcher, and the majority of them were able to go 6-7 innings. I definitely think Shota Imanaga can do it. Justin Steele can do it. Jameson Taillon has done it consistently this past year. So if these guys are going 6-7 innings, you maybe put in a relief pitcher, then you go Eli Morgan, then your closer, depending on how you want to mix and match that. But Eli Morgan, with the numbers that he had, this is a pretty good addition. So right now, I like this for the Cubs a lot, but ultimately it depends on how the Cubs and Craig Counsell want to operate the bullpen because anything can change. I'm just being hypothetical with it. He could be in the setup role. I think that's where you could put him best, but ultimately time will tell. And anyways, we're going to go to the second trade, and that is for a catcher, but it seems like a depth option, not the backup. At least I hope it isn't. They make a trade with the Los Angeles Angels, and they get Matt Tice. So Matt Tice was the backup to Logan O'Hoppe in Los Angeles for the Angels, and he was traded for cash considerations, and he was signed to like a 1-year deal or whatever like that, or $1 million. But I think his projected salary in the minor leagues is like $400,000. So it's a two-way deal, and I think he could definitely be the guy that you put maybe in Iowa as like another depth option for the Cubs if they need it. He just isn't good enough to be your backup, and I definitely think the Angels realize that because they signed the guy out of Atlanta. So Matt Tice isn't a terrible addition, but I just don't think he and Miguel Amaya can be your catching tandem for the Chicago Cubs next year. It's a good risk to take, and it's definitely a project, but again, we'll see what happens with that. Anyways, let's get to the DFAs and non-tendered players that the Cubs had to get rid of to help balance out their 40-man roster. So the first one we're going to talk about is Patrick Wisdom. So Patrick Wisdom was a utility infielder. He played first and third base, depending on how they wanted to operate him. I know he was in a lot at the end of the year for Michael Busch at first base, which didn't really sit well with a lot of Cubs fans, myself included, because Michael Busch was one of the better players on the Cubs this past year. And Patrick Wisdom he struggled, to say the least. He really wasn't what he was to start the rebuild for the Cubs in 2021. That's really one of the bright spots after they traded Rizzo, Bryant, Baez, you name it. But Patrick Wisdom, I think his time was up. He's 33 years old. He's getting up there in age, and I don't think he had a spot on the team anymore, and they just needed to move on from him. The second guy we're going to talk about is Mike Tauchman. Mike Tauchman is also 33 years old. He is a depth outfielder. He was on the bench for most of the year, but when he was playing, he was pretty good. He had his fair share in left, right, and center field, depending on guys that were in and out of the lineup. I know Cody Bellinger was rehabbing from his injury, so he was in right field quite a bit with Seiya Suzuki going with that fair share as well. He had a couple games in the left field. He played center field sometimes before PCA really locked down that position. I was a little disappointed on this one. I think Mike Tauchman was pretty solid for the Chicago Cubs. He is quite a journeyman. He came from the Hanwha Eagles 2 years ago, and then the last few years he was with the Cubs. I think Mike Tauchman, I do think he deserves to go through free agency, see if he can be able to get a home with another team. I definitely think if you need him to be a starter, he can absolutely be one. I don't think he's one that you take a risk on to be a starter, but as a depth option, he's really phenomenal, and they definitely deserve to give him that option to find somewhere else to go in free agency. The next one is Nick Madrigal. He is a depth second baseman for the Cubs. He's 27 years old. He came in from a trade a couple years ago, and he's just struggled at the plate. He just really wasn't able to hit the ball that well. And on top of that, he's been struggling with injuries, so that really set him back too. I think it was time to move on from him as well. So I definitely like the moves that Jed Hoyer's made outside of Mike Tauchman, getting rid of those guys. I think Madrigal, his time was up with the Cubs. So is Patrick Wisdom, Mike Tauchman. Hopefully it's a respect thing where maybe he goes in free agency, finds somewhere else to go. But I do think that's a bittersweet loss for the Chicago Cubs because I was a big fan of Mike Tauchman. When he came into play, he really played pretty well. So that guy definitely will be missed. But anyways, let's get to the big elephant in the room, and that is the Cody Bellinger trade rumors. So this is the last topic we have for today's episode, and this one is big. So as most of you know, he opted into his deal. $27.5 million is his projected salary, and the Cubs want to get rid of it. So there's been rumors as to how that's going to work. Is he going to be just a cap dump? Is he going to get some value? We don't know. But what we do know is they're going to try to get rid of him. And right now there hasn't been any takers. So there have been some teams that have been poked around as potential landing spots for him. And I'm just going to go over 4 of them in specifics because I think those are 4 guys that can definitely be homes for Cody Bellinger. We're going to start with the Atlanta Braves because I saw some rumors for him. I really don't necessarily see a major fit for the Atlanta Braves for Cody Bellinger unless the Cubs are retaining salary. I don't know where exactly they would put him. The next one is the Los Angeles Angels. The Angels have been really busy in free agency. They already got Kikuchi from the Houston Astros. They got, obviously, Kyle Hendricks. They signed the catcher from Atlanta. The Los Angeles Angels have been making moves lately, and I think they're not done. So apparently another rumor that I saw was that the Los Angeles Angels were looking for a lefty batter, and that's Cody Bellinger. I think Cody Bellinger could be a fit for Los Angeles Angels based on them wanting a left-handed batter that can really hit the ball. And again, the salary is a little bit of an issue because they might have to retain some money, but we'll see what happens. And then the other two teams are the New York teams. I definitely think that one of these New York teams are definitely an option for Cody Bellinger, whether you put him at the DH position or in right field or center field or first base because he played first base. New York they're pretty interesting so far in free agency. Obviously, the Yankees, their big deal right now is with Juan Soto. Is he going to go back to the Yankees? Is he not? The Mets are also in on Juan Soto. Pete Alonso is a free agent. Anthony Rizzo was on the Yankees. He's not going to be there anymore. So both teams have options here, and we'll see what happens with that. So I definitely believe, at the very least, if one of them doesn't get Juan Soto, the other one could get Cody Bellinger. But again, it just depends on the salary there. I think if he goes to the Yankees, you definitely potentially put him at first base. He could go to the right field depending on if Juan Soto comes back or not. But they do have Jason Dominguez coming in there. They also have Alex Verdugo going out the door. And then they have Aaron Judge, obviously. But at the same time, the Yankees, I definitely think if Cody Bellinger were to go to the Yankees, he would go to first base. New York Mets is a lot more interesting because they obviously have Pete Alonso, who's a free agent. Is he going to go back to the Mets or is he not? We'll see. But they also have an outfield position open. They're definitely looking at Juan Soto. We'll see what happens there. I think the Mets, honestly, are the most likely option if they can be able to get his salary on there. It's a big risk, but if Cody Bellinger can be able to prove that he was the 2023 Cody Bellinger next year, not the 2024, I definitely think the Mets are probably the most likely landing spot for him, to be quite honest with you, because he played different positions, and the Mets have an abundance of positions that they need to fill, whether it's Pete Alonso at first base or not. They have a ton of options that they can really deal with right now, so we'll see what happens with that. And then this is one that I'm just throwing around here. It's the Philadelphia Phillies because I saw a rumor that they were going to try to move on from Nick Castellanos. Obviously, Bryce Harper is playing at first base. He might stay there. He might go back to the outfield. Who knows? But I definitely think that, at least in my opinion, Isaac Paredes could potentially be a trade candidate for the Cubs. That's not 100% guaranteed. But I was thinking of a possibility that you trade Cody Bellinger to the Phillies with retained salary, because I don't think the Phillies are going to want to take on his entire salary. And they are looking to trade Alec Boehm, and that's a guy that I'm really interested in for the Chicago Cubs. I think he honestly would be an upgrade at third base over Paredes, just because I'm pretty skeptical whether Paredes can be able to hit the ball deep at Wrigley Field, because obviously he had 30 home runs with the Rays, but again, that's Tropicana Field, to be quite honest with you. So we'll see what happens with that. But Cody Bellinger, I don't believe will be in a Cubs uniform to start the year next year, but it's a matter of where he goes and what the salary and the money is going to look like. I don't think this is going to happen before Juan Soto signs. I think a lot of free agency moves and a lot of moves that all 30 MLB teams make will happen after Juan Soto signs, and he's projected to sign closer to winter meetings, so we're just going to have to wait a little bit more for Juan Soto to sign. I think this offseason has been a huge domino effect for all these teams. So ultimately, it depends on Juan Soto, in my opinion, and then maybe we'll see some more moves happen sooner rather than later after Juan Soto signs. So that's my episode for you. Give me your thoughts on all this news. I think the Chicago Cubs, their work is, for the most part, cut out for them. But again, it's just a matter of executing those moves because the roster needs to be fixed, and quite a lot, because the roster last year was not good enough, and we'll see what happens with this. Hopefully they don't reduce their salary. Hopefully it's not a thing where they're just trying to move out salary just to move it. Tom Ricketts not being cheap. So there's a lot of interesting things that are going to happen this offseason, and I'll be here for more episodes regarding the free agency and winter meetings because those are right around the corner, like I just said. It's going to be a busy and interesting offseason, so we'll see what happens. Anyways, if you were interested in this content, like I said, feel free to like and subscribe, and I will see you for more episodes in the near future. But for now, this is Jack from Cubs 360, and go Cubs go.